Bismillah. So the next question, Assalamu alaikum, thank you for this session and for all the advice. I want to ask about whether there is an age when children should be taught certain stories which contain heavy concepts, such as what happened between Ismail alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam, and being instructed to slaughter him, or the incident between Habil and Kabil, Cain and Abel. I was reading a story aimed at children and it contained this story, but I felt uncomfortable when he stated he killed his brother to say this to my child. But this is a Quranic story, and then I wondered, is this my own issue? And not necessarily about my child. My son is nearly 5 years old.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سؤال جيد ودقيق وتدل على اهتمام الشخص بأبنائه وبنوعية القصص التي ينبغي أن تطرح عليه. لا شك أن هناك عدة عوامل ينبغي أن نهتم بها. قابلية هذا الطفل أولاً في أي عمر، ثم قابليته، يعني مثل قصة سيدنا إسماعيل مع ابنه وذبحه. نحتاج أن نكون إلى في سن، يعني في المراهقة، في سن المراهقة جيد 14 سنة وما فوق، أمر عادي. وأيضاً نلاحظ أمر مهم جداً، نوعية الألفاظ التي يعني تطرح أو تلقى على الابن أو الأبناء بأي أسلوب. لو نعرف أن ابننا حساس من هذه الناحية، حتى من رؤية الدم أو من هذا المفهوم نفسه القتل، فينبغي أن نلاحظ هذا الأمر ولا نذكر له هذه القصة. يعني الحمد لله عندنا قصص، مئات القصص موجودة، ولا نذكر له هذه القصة.
So Habib firstly said this is a very good question. It's a very precise and particular question, and it also shows great concern from the parent, whether he's concerned about or she's concerned about the child and you know what they intake. So the first thing we look at is, can the child accept this? Can the child sort of receive this type of a message? And in terms of the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ismail alayhi salam, no doubt it's most suitable probably for like teenagers or 11 plus, that kind of age. It's not going to be as appropriate for younger ones. And then so we then also have to assess the child as well. So we have to look, if we know that the child is going to be afraid of certain things or has a like sort of a dislike towards blood or things like that, then we of course leave that. And we have many stories. We have like thousands and thousands of stories to choose from. So we can choose another story that carries the same message, but it's not going to cause any type of fear or discomfort within the child.
أما بالنسبة لقصة هابيل وقابيل فلا يوجد فيها أي إشكال، لأن يعني هي تعالج أمر مهم جدا، وهي تعالج أمر من أمور الضروريات الخمس عندنا في الإسلام. في الشريعة عندنا الكليات الخمس أو الضروريات الخمس مهمة جدا في الحفاظ على النفس. وأبناءنا في أي سن يعني يحتاجون أن يتعرفون على أنه ينبغي أن يحافظ على نفسه وعلى ذاته ويحافظ على حياة الآخرين أيضا، لا يعتدي على الآخرين. فأنه ربما لا نريد أن يعني لا نخبرهم بأنه أراد أن يقتله، أراد أن يؤذيه فرمى عليه الحجر فأصيب وتألم ثم مات. فمن ناحية أنه ينبغي أن لا نعتدي على أحد تقال هذه القصة، وهي جيدة جدا. ومن الأشياء التي كنت أتمناها هذه الكليات الخمس، يعني كنت أريد أن يعني أعمل مثل ورشة ونتكلم في حولها بما ينبغي أن نخبر به أبناءنا حول هذه الكليات الخمس، قصص وغير قصص. ولو وجدت قصص حول الكليات الخمس هذه من أروع ما يمكن، لأنها مهمة جدا.
So Habib mentioned that, first of all, in the story of Cain and Abel, famous story of the two sons of the Prophet Adam alayhi salam, there's no problem here. This is a very important story because it indicates towards one of the 5 sort of principles or one of the 5 purposes of the Sharia. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send down the sacred law? Is to protect these 5 principles of life and intellect and people's honor and these types of things. So we should talk about this with our children, but because protection of life is key, and our children need to understand that protecting themselves and also protecting the lives of others is very important. So when we look at the story, we don't necessarily have to mention death or the fact that he was killed. We can just talk about the fact that he was struck by a stone, and then make the point that we should never be aggressive towards somebody. We should never cause harm towards anybody else. And this is really important. Habib added as an additional point that these 5 principles, these 5 foundations that the Sharia is based upon, we need to explain these to our children either through stories or without stories. And if we can find good stories that illustrate the importance of protecting these 5 principles, then this is only going to be beneficial.
ثم الأبناء يعني لا يركزون كثيرا على تفاصيل الألفاظ هذه التي نقولها. ونحن نحتاج إلى أن نختار الألفاظ التي تناسب أعمارهم.
So the other thing is the children don't necessarily focus that much on the very sort of details of what we're saying. And what is important here is that we also need to make sure that we choose the right words. And we choose words that are appropriate, that are going to have an impact, and that are also not going to have any type of detrimental impact too.
خاصة في العمر الذي ذكر الآن، في تقول أن في الخامسة من عمره.
Particularly at this age, so if a child is 5 years old, they're not necessarily going to be paying that close attention to the details of the story in that regard.
نعم.
Okay, so the next question, inshallah. I have 3 children, 2 daughters aged 4 and 2 years old, and a baby boy of 6 months. I'm looking for book guidelines or resources on Islamic parenting, focusing on early years. I am planning to homeschool my children, inshallah.
من الأمور المهمة في السن هذا 6 أشهر و2 و4 سنوات، يعني فقط نحن نحميهم مما يؤذيهم في أنفسهم، فنبعد عنهم الأشياء الخطيرة، و نحافظ عليهم من الأطعمة السيئة، ونهتم بصحتهم وهم ينمون. الأمر الآخر اللي هو الأمر النفسي والعقلي في الأفكار والهذه، هو هذا أن نكون نحن معهم دائما، نشاركهم الألعاب، فهم يتعلمون من خلال الألعاب، ينمون من خلال الألعاب، يفكرون من خلال الألعاب، فهم يكبرون من خلال الألعاب والكلام والاختلاط معهم. وفي 4 سنوات نترك له بعض الألعاب يلعب وننظر من بعيد، أحيانا نشارك معه الألعاب التي هو يحبها، ومن هنا نبدأ تكوين العلاقة فيما بيننا وبين أبنائنا. فنحن نحافظ أولا على صحته الجسدية والعقلية، ومن الناحية النفسية هذا الذي ذكرته لكم سابقا.
So at this age, I was mentioning in this question, like a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-month-old, the key thing here is, first and foremost, is to protect these children from any type of harm, anything that may affect them or may be dangerous for them. Yeah. Also, we also protect them from certain types of food that may be harmful for them. So we look after their physical health in terms of their surroundings, and also their physical health in terms of their food. Now, in terms of psychological or emotional development, this is entirely based on play. We play with the children, and through this interaction, through this play, we teach them everything else that they need to know in terms of their moral development and in terms of all of these other aspects. And really, we raise them entirely on this. And the key point is we are present, we are with them. Then maybe at the age of 4, we now start to allow them to play and take a bit of a distance, give them a little bit of independence at the age of 4, where they now play a little bit further away from us, and be able to watch them play and be able to supervise them in that regard. And that's really what's required.
فأي كتب وأي مصادر إرشادية تعلم الأب أو الأم كيف يتحاور مع الأبناء، كيف يسأل الأبناء الأسئلة المناسبة الذي في عمر 4 سنوات أو في عمر 2 سنين، وكيف يؤدبهم، هي هذه الكتب والمصادر التي نحتاجها بطريقة لطيفة جدا. يعني التربية بطريقة لطيفة جدا معهم، الحوار بطريقة لطيفة، التأديب بطريقة لطيفة، لأنهم سنة يعني في عمر في بداية العمر، يعني ما يحتاجوا إلى عنف أبدا يعني.
So in terms of books or sources, any book or any resource that teaches how to dialogue with a child, how to have a meaningful conversation with the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old for that matter, how to ask questions, and the type of questions that we should ask for this age. Also, how to rear the child, how to nurture the child in a positive way. And no doubt, Habib emphasized, all of this is done with great kindness and gentleness. I mean, these children, of course, are the beginning of their lives. There should be no type of harshness and no type of sort of discipline in any type of negative way whatsoever here. It's very much about gentleness and lightness at this stage. Okay, so the next question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Habib. I have the opportunity to study Deen, alhamdulillah. Yeah. So this is, I think it's a mother asking, I have the opportunity to study Deen, alhamdulillah. I also have a 1-year-old baby girl. What would be the better decision for me to make? To study and leave my baby under someone else's care, or stay home with the baby?
يعني حسب الظروف، لكن الأهمية لابد أن الأمور أنها نتوازن. يعني هل تعلم الدين هو الأمر الواجب الذي عليك؟ إذا كان من الأمر الواجب فهو واجب، مع مراعاته أيضا. لا تتركين مع تعلم الأمر الواجب والعلم الواجب في الدين أن لا نترك أبناءنا يعني مهملين. فلا بد أن نأتي بأشخاص يعتنون بأطفالنا. وإذا استطعت أن تتعلمين الدين وطفلك بجانبك، والذي يراعي هذا الطفل هو بجانبك، فهو أفضل. رعاية الطفل وعنايته يعني أمر مهم جدا، ولكن يعني يمكن أن نوازن. رعاية الطفل لا تأخذ وقت طويل، فإذا كان الشخص الذي يراعي ابننا نأمنه لا بأس، فيعني يترك الطفل مع شخص نأمنه ويعني يقوم برعايته رعاية جيدة، ونحن نهتم بتعلمنا، خاصة إن كان تعلم الأمر الواجب في الدين.
So Habib mentioned, of course, circumstances are different. The key issue here is balance. So the first question to ask is this knowledge fard ayn? Is this knowledge like obligatory? Is it the knowledge that you have to learn? If that is, then of course you have to learn that knowledge, but at the same time you can't neglect or disregard the child. This is the first thing. And then secondly, if you can learn, and let's just say it's either obligatory or non-obligatory knowledge, you can learn it, and for the child to be in your presence. Maybe somebody's looking after the child, but you can still see them. They're still within that sort of, within the same room or the same place. That would be better. And then finally, he mentioned that it's not going to take all of your time to raise the child in that sense. That if you can find somebody who's reliable and who's able to take care of the needs of the child, and then you can still be supervising that, keeping an eye on that, and at the same time still be able to learn. And he mentioned that, of course, like looking after and taking care of children is a really, really important matter. So no doubt that obviously it has to be taken care of, but at the same time, alhamdulillah, we can also find other means to then be able to engage with knowledge also. I work with many young Muslim people who struggle with their identity, such as gender identity. A lot of our youth are struggling with sexuality and the belief of being LGBTQ and it being acceptable among society. And a lot of them are coming out with being bisexual and transgender. How do we support those who struggle with sexuality?
يعني يحتاج إلى توضيح. يعني هل هم حقيقة أو بمجرد اجتماعهم مع أشخاص يعلنون عن توجههم الجنسي هذا، وهل يعني ينبغي البحث عن حقيقة هذا الأمر؟ يعني ونأمن كثير لأصحاب الأطباء المسلمين الذين يتحققون من وجود هذا. هل هم عندهم اختلاط؟ هل هم يعني مجرد انتماء لانتمائهم للأصدقاء، أو أنه فعلا حقيقة هو يشتكي من هذا الأمر؟ يعني يفرق بين الاثنين، بين هل هو مجرد يعني وجوده مع أصدقاء بهذه الصفة، أو هو حقيقة يشعر بهذا الأمر وما علاجه يعني.
So the first thing is on this question is that we need to clarify or look into the matter. Is it really a problem? Do they really have this issue of these type of tendencies or thoughts, or is it merely societal pressures or what they're seeing around them? Is it due to them wanting to belong to a certain group or go along with their friends, peer pressure, these types of things? Is this what is leading to them saying these things, that they have inclinations towards things like LGBTQ, or is it actually a real matter? And there's many Muslim psychologists and specialists that do this job. Yeah, their role is to differentiate between those matters which are real in this regard and those matters which are just based upon fitting into the society around them. Okay, so the next question. Assalamu alaikum. does the family of Ahlul Bayt do? Okay. Assalamu alaikum. What does the family of Ahlul Bayt do to teach their children and raise them until being a kind person in the future? MashaAllah. Thank you.
نعم، لعلهم يقصدون يعني بيوت التربية الذين يعتنون بتربية أبنائهم هم يعني ليس كل أهل البيت الذي يذكر هنا، لكن بيوت التربية التي اختصت الذي قامت على أمور التربية، هم تربيتهم أيضا بالرفق وتكوين العلاقة يعني مع أبنائهم، خاصة تكوين العلاقة الجيدة ووجود برامج من خلالها يلقون إليهم بالقيم والمفاهيم وهناك مساحة من الاختيار حتى في الأبناء. قد الابن يختار إلى طريق آخر ليس شرطا أن يعني يكون مثل أبيه من العلماء أو من الأولياء أو ليس شرطا، ولكن هم الشيء الذي يعني نحافظ عليه أننا نبقى في علاقة جيدة مع أبنائنا من خلالها التي يمكن أن نضع هذه المفاهيم والقيم والمبادئ وتعلقنا بالدين ومحبتنا للعلماء والأولياء. فأعرف يعني معظم مشايخنا الكبار المشهورين أن كنت أسأل، لأني مهتم بهذا الأمر في مجالسة الآباء، كنت أسألهم هل فلان الفلاني من حبايبنا ومشايخنا، الحبيب عبد القادر بن أحمد السقاف، الحبيب عمر بن حفيظ، الحبيب أبو بكر المشهور وغيره، يعني كلهم عرفت أنهم هم يجلسون مع أبنائهم، لهم جلسة خاصة مع أبنائهم. بعض الجلسات تكون جلسة في قراءة، ومن خلال القراءة يكون محادثة ويفهم هذا الذي يريده ماذا يشعر، فهناك لقاء يعني ما بين هؤلاء الكبار مع أبنائهم يعني.
So he said that those concerned with such matters as Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet ﷺ, firstly they're not necessarily all the Ahlul Bayt are the same, but those who are really concerned with this, they raise their children upon first and foremost rifq. They have this idea of gentleness and softness with their children, and even more importantly on having a really strong and powerful connection or relationship. This is actually the key, the cornerstone of what the Ahlul Bayt focus on above and beyond anything else. And then through that, once they've developed that relationship with the children, this is when they now plant certain values, certain understandings, like the love of the scholars and the saintly people of this community. They implant all of that through the power of this relationship. Also, they have a certain level of like a relaxed approach. They allow their children to take their own path. It's not necessary for them to become a scholar or to become exactly like their father or their mother or whatever it might be, but rather they allow them to find their own path as long as it's within these understandings that they have and within the key values. So they'll do this, and he mentioned that if you look at many of these great ulama and awliya, the likes of Habib al-Saqaf, Habib Umar bin Hafiz, and many others, that they will have specific gatherings with their children. So they'll have specific meetings or gatherings with their children where they'll have conversations, they'll understand their emotions, how they're feeling, and they'll really have a deep and profound understanding of their children that comes through having specific gatherings and taking out time to have one-to-one or small group time with them. Okay, the next question. Assalamu alaikum. Question is, how do I encourage my husband to be a part of these meetings? He is at work all day and comes home before we have supper, and he is tired. What would be some recommendations, inshallah, for him to be part of these family gatherings?
أولاً هل زوجك يحب هذا النوع من المعلومات أو لا؟ إذا كان يحب هذا النوع من المعلومات عليك أن تبحثي الأفضل وخلاصة ما تمت الاستفادة منه وتتناقشي معه وتحاوري معه. قيل كذا وسمعت كذا وقيل كذا وكان يستشهد بكذا. اذكري له أفضل ما سمعتيه من خلال هذه اللقاءات يعني. ويعني إذا أبدأ شيء تقدمي له زيادة، إذا أبدأ شيء من التفاعل تقدمي له زيادة. ثم الحمد لله هناك مسجل يعني موجود على اليوتيوب يمكن أن يستمع، وربما تكون هناك يعني حلقات مختصرة أو يريد أن يبحث عن الأسئلة فقط، تقدمي له الشيء الذي مدته قصيرة ويرغب فيه.
So the first thing that Habib mentioned is that in terms of the husband is, does he love this type of, does he have some type of desire for these types of gatherings in the first place? So the first thing to do would be to explain to him the benefits of it, to encourage him and to try to explain the fact that this is a worthwhile thing. Maybe he can explain it to him present something to him. Maybe you can even watch something like we have online, maybe like a shortened version, spend a few minutes where he sees the benefits of this family gathering and sees the goodness that comes from it.